people are still coming in, we'll be fine. Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to this session called Implementing Acquisitions in Alma. That's actually the name of our series. And this is the first session for us. It is a 6-week session. We've done this one time previously, and it was only 5. So we stretched it out to 6 because there's a lot of information I'm trying to give you and really starting from the ground up. So it'll be for this week and the next 5 weeks. So it'll be 6 weeks in a row. And if you ever miss any of the sessions, maybe you have meetings or aren't at work that day, no problem. The recordings will be posted for you, and I'll show you where that is a little bit later. So this series, I designed this series to be focusing on teaching our Alma customers how to implement acquisitions in Alma. So my intent is that those of you that are here are already live on Alma, your past implementation, that you're either not using acquisitions at all or you're not using acquisitions at all or not using all of the functionality in Alma's app, what Alma has to offer. I also think that you're probably interested in learning how acquisitions workflows can reduce the amount of time you spend on resource management. And if you're looking for details on how you're spending your budget and seeking more information on how acquired resources are used by the library's patrons. So I do have an additional document, and it's called Acquisitions User Roles and Terminology. And let me pull that up. And it is on, I just updated it because I added a line to it today. Come on, move over here. Oh, I don't want to edit it and do all this tracking. Here we go. Okay. Well, I didn't mean to do that. So here's this document, and it's talking about user roles related to acquisitions. So we'll be talking about these, and you know how these roles are highlighted in the documentation. So the roles related to different parts of acquisitions and what you could do with those roles. So I just pulled these right out of the documentation, but this is a selection of those roles that are very tightly tied to acquisitions. And then some common terms that you'll hear me say. A lot of them are acronyms. You'll see them throughout our documentation. And this page is available on our series site from the Customer Knowledge Center, or the CKC. That's knowledge.exlibrisgroup.com. So that's what that is. Before we really get going here, I wanted to mention a few things about Webex. If you have any audio or video issues, just exit and rejoin the Webex session. Sometimes I'll get a message that someone can't hear me, and if I see that message come in, I will confirm that other people can indeed hear me. So if that's the situation, it's your connection, not mine. And so, like I said, just exit and rejoin Webex, and that should fix it. The meeting is being recorded. It'll be made available to you on the series dashboard, so you'll be able to see that. And then now Wendy Lim is here with me, and she's Customer Success Manager here at Ex Libris. And so we are both panelists. So if you have, we welcome chats, we welcome comments. Please send it to all panelists so that she can see it and I can see it. And then also, when each session is done, I'll be creating a list of Q&A documents. So we can't promise we're going to answer every question during the series. Sometimes it might be a link. Sometimes it might be something that requires illustration. Sometimes it's a really quick answer. But I do take all of those comments, questions, etc., and make a Q&A doc to share back to everyone. So using all panelists means she can see it and I can see it, and I can get all the information to create that document. So this is our agenda. We're going to be talking about what is acquisitions, what are the benefits of implementing acquisitions, and then we're going to get into what is the workflow. We're going to talk about configuration. about infrastructure. These are things that need to be in place before you use acquisitions. And then also decisions to make. And I'm just bringing them up now, and I bring them up at the very end of the whole series too. So it's just things to think about, because you might, start on part of it and then be able to add additional features and functionality into your workflow in the future after you get going. So we're starting here with acquisitions in Alma. Now, I like to ask, why aren't you using acquisitions in Alma today? And these are some of the comments I've gotten. Okay, we didn't have time to implement it when we migrated to Alma. If you weren't using acquisitions in your previous system, I totally get that, and that's not the time to undertake that workflow. But it is now. You're live. You're ready to go. Let's see what this can do for you. Here, that libraries are, small staff with only a few operators. Well, acquisitions can actually save you time and energy and allow you to track things. So there are definite benefits. You didn't use acquisitions in your previous system? Well, welcome to it now. It's too much work. It can be very daunting, but once you understand how it works and what it can do for you, it's a good use of your time. And then the business office told us we can't. Well, that's a moot point. Working in acquisitions in Alma is for you. It's not for them. It's for you, your own tracking, your own knowledge, to see how you're spending your money, etc. So what the business office does is a completely separate decision. Does anyone have anything to add? If there's a reason you're not using acquisitions, you can go ahead and put it in the chat. So if you're not using acquisitions, how are you tracking your information? Are you using a third-party system like Excel or Word, Google Docs, etc.? What are you tracking? How much time does that take, and who's responsible? How accurate is the information, and how up-to-date is the information, and how thorough? What you do in Alma, this work you do in Alma, is for your benefit. Integration with the business office is a nice bonus, but not required. And we'll also be looking at integration options. I think that's in session 6 of the series. That's the last session. So I'm going to be doing everything very manually, but then in the last, because I don't have systems with which to integrate, but in the last session of the series, I'll be talking about those options. What do we need to have in Alma in order to use acquisitions? You have to have an active fiscal period. You have to have a ledger with at least one allocated fund. I hope you have more than that, but at least one. We need at least one vendor record. And then also your operators need to have appropriate roles and scopes to allow them to do that work in acquisitions. So these are my rules to live by, and you'll see this slide a number of times. I'm very much into saying, let Alma do the work for you. Let it do the work. You reap the benefits of it, but also don't make things more complicated than they need to be. There are options about additional data checks. You don't have to enable all those if you're a smaller site, because it does add steps. It adds another click. It adds more people into the mix. And you don't need to do that. Don't ever make it more complicated than it needs to be, but we want to streamline what you do and make you an efficient user of your time. So what are the benefits of implementing acquisitions? For one thing, inventory gets created automatically. That benefits the display of information in Alma and in Discovery, or it affects the display of Alma information in Alma and Discovery. Tracking how money is spent, so how you're spending your library's money, and then also availability of cost per use information. Now we're going to take a look here. So if you automate inventory creation by using acquisitions, what the workflow is that physical and electronic inventory is created at the point of ordering. Alma does that at the point of ordering. So what does that mean? That means that for any physical item records, they have the correct status of not in place of that item record. Remember how there's two, that status is either in place or not in place. So it's not in place at the time of creation. Relevant dates around expected dates, receiving dates, claiming, activation dates, all are associated with the inventory. And having that information in the inventory on the item record, again, gives you accuracy with your workflow, your reporting and tasks and troubleshooting. So by using this inventory creation, by using acquisition, staff members can see the materials that the library's ordered. And also patrons are aware of physical resources that are on order. And you may allow them to place holds at that point. That's completely up to you. So if you're an acquisitions operator and you're in Alma, this is what you'll see for an order line. If I searched order lines, what do I see? And I just got a couple screenshots here. I can see that this purchase order is sent, the PO line is sent, so it's out of our team's hands and it's off to the vendor. We're waiting for this to come in. I can link right to the inventory that's already been created. In this red here, I can see the expected delivery or activation dates for this electronic resource. It's an activation date. For a physical resource, it is a expected date when it comes into the door. And then also you can see if this is an electronic resource, whether the resource is activated or not. So this is the view from Alma, what your acquisitions operators see. What if you're not an acquisitions operator? What if you work in fulfillment? You work, with the collection. You're in your reference staff. What are they going to see? Searching. This is a title search results for a physical item and an electronic item. And again, I can see that this item, it's not available. It's not on shelf. For the electronic resource, I can see that it's inactive. I can see that little icon. That's the little community zone icon. I can see by it being gray, I know that it's not active. For what do you see for a physical item search? I can see that a physical item is not in place. The process type is acquisition. This is very clear. Once I know this as a staff member, I know that this is not even in the library yet. It's not even in the door, still on order. I can link to the purchase order up here. Again, for an electronic portfolio, I can see that an order was placed. I can link to that, maybe take a look around, and I can see that it's not activated. Now, what do you see out in discovery for these materials? Well, the electronic materials, if they're not activated, they're just not going to show in discovery. But for the print, the physical resources, for a discovery search, I could see the physical item is not currently available because it's on order. Now, you can adjust how much information you're sharing out here in discovery. So you could just have on order and leave the dates off. All your borrowers need to know is that it's not here yet. And I could log in and place a request on this so that when it does come in, it'll be given to me as from a hold. So the second benefit I talked about was how is the library's money spent? So purchase order lines encumber monies in their associated funds, and then invoices disencumber and expend monies and funds. And then reporting codes that are applied at the PO line, those can be applied. So they can be applied at a PO line or invoice. All of these are reportable. You can see exactly how much money you have, how you've been spending your money, etc. How much money has been spent, encumbered, and is left in the current fiscal year, that'll tell you, plus historical tracking of how funds have been spent in past fiscal years. I talked about cost per use also. Cost per use can easily, it's finding, the cost of the item by the number of times it's been used. For electronic resources, that usage data can be loaded directly into Alma. And if you've got your acquisitions information in there, we do have counter, your counter stats can be resolved or linked, uploaded right into Alma. And we have reports already written in acquisitions for you to calculate cost per use. And that's something we've worked on. We've even overhauled that entire part of analytics to give you that data. So I want to show you a couple things in Alma. Let me come over here. So I want to do physical items with a process type equals acquisition. These are my items that are on order. You'll see PO lines associated to them. I can see them right here. Now, if I change this from acquisition to in process, those are the items that have been received, and they are in my tech services getting worked on. So they're still not in place, but they're in the building. Another way to see items that have not yet arrived, if you have these roles, is to go to the receiving workbench. Let me make sure I'm in the right place. Oh, I'm at circulation. I need to move to my act desk. Did I lose my roles? I'm going to have to check my roles. I'm not seeing those. Oh, maybe this, okay, no acquisitions department was selected. Okay. I'm going to go have to check that because I'm not seeing my acquisitions department in here. Okay. I'm going to go double check that when we are done. Okay. So let's now get back here. So let's talk about the workflow. Some people with us might have never have used an acquisition system and are tracking their purchases manually using third-party tools like spreadsheets. How the workflow goes in Alma is that we always begin with a bibliographic record. And then from that, create a purchase order line. Now, the quality of that bib record, how robust, where you get that, you have options. Then we create the purchase order line. So from the purchase order lines get packaged into purchase orders. So that's a container to hold the PO lines, to group the PO lines. That gets sent off to the vendor. Then the physical materials come in the door, or electronic materials need to be activated, making them available. And then we also do need to invoice. So complete the invoice to close out the transaction, to pay the vendor, etc. Now, some libraries invoice and then receive, and that's fine if that's your workflow. If the same person does both of these jobs in your library, receiving and invoicing, it's a great idea to do that. But if they're different people, however you want to do it is fine. So Alma's focus is on the PO line, not the PO. The PO, the purchase order, is literally a container that groups those purchase order lines. What Alma looks at, it looks at those purchase order lines. Let's say you have 10 purchase order lines. 8 of them come in just fine. 2 of them don't. Those are the 2 that Alma's going to draw your eye to, because Alma's going to say, hey, go check these out. They're not here yet, whether it's a claim, whether, whatever you need to follow up on, you only need to know about those two. The other 8, let them go. When that inventory gets created at the beginning of the process by creating purchase order lines, there is associated data like expected dates, claim dates, etc. Choices made, like at the PO line type, which we're going to see next week, when purchasing a resource impacts downstream data and workflows, like knowing that a physical resource needs to come in the door, electronic resource needs to get activated, whether it's a one-time order or a recurring PO type, like a subscription or standing order. And so any staff working in any technical services role should understand the impact of those initial purchasing decisions. So now we're going to get into configuration around how many acquisitions departments, acquisitions ordering units are at your institution. Some of you might have, now I might have people in this call that are one Alma institution, one Alma library, and that's it. That's fine. Now in my scenario here and in my little test environment that I have here, I do have multiple libraries, but I do have, if I have a centralized acquisition department, they do all the purchasing for all of those libraries. You might have distributed acquisitions and processing. Sometimes a law or medical library might operate a little more independently. So in this scenario, the main library purchases materials, catalogs materials for main science and art libraries, where law is independent. So just understanding what that structure is. And that structure then is set up in this relationships section. So if you go into configuration, you have to select the library. So go away from the institution to the specific library, go to fulfillment, library management relationships. And this acquire for column, that determines if the library that you selected up here can acquire for items for other libraries. And if you need to edit this, maybe it comes over as all and you need to take out one of your libraries, this is where I can add the correct configuration and remove this all line. So I mentioned, so we also have something called the acquisitions work order type. So this is set up under configuration general. So we stay at the institution level, work orders and departments, work order types. So there is a code in here called ACK work order. So ACK work order type was created when your Alma environment was provisioned. Do not create a new one. This code is required for acquisitions functionality. You can change this name, you can change the description, but don't make a new one, just utilize this existing code. If I go over to Alma, config, acquisitions, I'm forgetting where it was. Config general work orders and departments. It's under general. General work order departments. The sandbox. Types, not departments. Okay, so here's that ACK work order. It's at the institution level. If I come in here, I can again edit those, but I need to leave the code. Now, I'm going to come back to the PowerPoint for just a moment, and then we're coming back to Alma. Now, the acquisitions departments come off of that work order type of acquisitions, work order. That's the work order type. And there are acquisitions departments. Now, these got created out of the box in your environment. It's just up to you to enable them, put the operators in there, etc. So this is under configuration. You have to select the library, general, work order, and departments, work order departments. So now we're going into work order departments. You're going to see one called Act Department and then whatever your library code is. Main, law, art, grad, whatever. Again, do not create a new department. We need this code for Act functionality. But if you want to rename it, what do you call that spot in the back where they do that work? Now we're going to go through the information on these tabs as well. So let's go over to Alma to do that instead of looking at that slide. So now I need to go to, let's go to main. So there will be an ACK work order department at music, at science, but they just won't be enabled. They won't have any, if that's not where acquisition work gets performed, you just don't add any operators and it's fine. So let's go look at main. Under general, work order departments. Act department main. You can see someone's been in here. I don't like that. Act department main. This is the one. That's the real one. So here's Act department main. Here's my name that I can change. Work time, that's roughly how much time does it take you to get things out to the floor from when it comes in? If you leave that 0, Alma changes it to 7. So put in a, you know, it's more of an estimate. And when I go to served libraries, this is telling me what libraries does this Act department serve? And I could just remove or attach right here. The contact information here only fill this out if it's different than the institution level. Again, this is another place. Don't make it more complicated. If the address is correct at the institution level and that'll get to you, don't change a thing. And then operators. So the operators listed here are the operators. Am I listed in here? I'm going to add me. I thought I was already added. Might not have been. I must not have been though. Here I am. That's why I didn't see this department in my dropdown. So you know how you can add roles on a user record? It's almost easier to do it here because the scoping is done. Now, since I changed my role, I do need to sign out and log back in again. That's the only time you have to get out of Alma and back in is if you change your role. And now, dun, 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 dun. Main library tech services. There we are. That's what I should see. Okay, so we talked about at work order departments. We talked about work order types and how you utilize the existing ACK work order departments and types. Do not create new ones. So in the Alma configuration menu, there are configurations to make regarding purchase orders, invoices, licenses, purchase requests in general. Some of these items may not require additional customization based on local practices in your library. So let's go ahead and this would all be done at the institution level. Let's go ahead and take a look at what these will look like. Reporting codes. We're going to see these when we create purchase order lines. They are not required. They're associated with a PO line and or an invoice line, so it's tracking how you spend your money. Used for reporting spending activities in analytics, so there's a benefit there. They're helpful as long as they're used consistently. And it goes beyond what your ledger and fund structure can report. So if you're interested in tracking your money, I heavily suggest setting these up. We'll see them next week and you'll get a better idea of how to use them. Purchasing review rules, not required. What this will do is based on conditions, a purchase order line can be set into a review status, and then another staff member has to go in and approve it and move it on down the line. So this will add a step to the workflow because someone has to do this work. So if you don't need that additional approval, internal approval, this is internal just in the library, do not set those up. Shipping method also not required. You can. It's associated with a PO. And if this is something you're interested in tracking in Alma, you could definitely configure it. PO line cancellation reasons. The existing entries may be all you need. You can go in and take a look at those and see if there's anything else that you would like to see. Now, purchase order line types, they're assigned at the creation of a PO line, and they're a combination of continuity and format. Some of them can be a little duplicative. So you can disable certain ones if you don't want such a long list, but see what comes up first, and then you can go in and take a look at those if you see a reason. We have PO line deferral reasons. If you are deferring a PO line, again, take a look at it. Acquisition method. Select as a default for manually created PO lines, such as purchase versus purchase at vendor system. So acquisition method, if you create a purchase order line in Alma, it's going to open up a certain way. And depending on your workflow, what purchase means is you're doing the work in Alma and you're doing the work externally. Maybe you're buying from Amazon. Maybe you don't have an integration to this vendor. You're having to do the work in two places. Purchase a vendor system, maybe you're working with Gobi, Oasis, whatever we're calling it now, and you do the work in their system. We'll talk about that with the 6th session in the series, automating. So if those come in, you're doing the work in one place and the systems are talking to each other, that's purchase a vendor system. There are also acquisition methods that do not require funding and pricing. Gifts is one. There's another one too, technical PLN. We'll talk about those. EDI vendor note field. So again, we'll talk about this at the last session of the series. Appeal line price threshold. This is another limit, another checkpoint you can put in place. If something costs over X dollars, it's going to require internal approval in the library. If you don't have that, it's set at the library level, not the institution. If you don't have that, don't make another bump in the road for yourself. So regarding invoice configuration, invoice review rules, why would something that would also, now this would send invoices into a review status before the check really gets cut. So you might have controls around that. Again, this adds a step to the workflow. Invoice approval rules. Invoices that have then been put into review and need to be approved. These two should sync up with one another. Reasons for disapproving an invoice. VAT codes, if you are in a state or country that pays tax, for the VAT information, you'll need to configure those. Payment method, how your invoices get paid, the business office, credit card, cash, check. There are some lines filled in there, but you can edit them if needed. An invoice amount threshold. This is again an internal check that can throw the invoice into an approval stage where another library employee needs to go in and approve it to get it paid. Now, you also have the power to add license information into Alma. It's not required, but it's helpful. Because then your staff can go into Alma to see the license terms, what, how many seats you have, or connection issues, or can you use it for interlibrary loan, etc. And also, some of our customers publish certain terms to Discovery. License data can be imported into Alma. I think that's that Onyx PL format. So if you get your license data from a vendor, we can just load it right into Alma instead of having to create it from scratch. Purchase request configuration. You can use Alma to do your purchase requests now that, if you're using acquisitions. So purchase requests can happen right in Alma. They could maybe come in from Primo. That can streamline the purchase request process and reduce reliance on third-party applications. Again, this is something you can look at down the road. Let's get acquisitions up moving and set a goal to also do your purchase requests in so much time. So some configurations you need to pay attention to. Currency. Now your current country's currency is already set up. If you work with other currencies, you'll need to edit that. Your fund and ledger fiscal period. You have to have this to create a ledger. If your fiscal period is more than 2 years out of date, you need to open a case with support for them to help you get that caught up. Fund types, those are used when creating a funds in a ledger. Acquisition job configuration, packaging, PO lines, and sushi harvesting, that's where those setups are taken care of. And then manage acquisitions alerts. Those are situations that you want Alma to check and alert you to when encountered. Here's the warning about the more than 2 years out of date. I'm going to show you something real quick because I try to do this in every one of my sessions. This is that new feature. If you just go and search Alma, whatever you're looking for. Okay, what did we get? This is from one of our customers, Carly. This is out of Illinois. So this is their wiki that they keep up to date for their vendor, for their members. Here is coming out of our documentation. And here this is too. So when you go, if you say, gosh, what was that thing called again? If you just go search Alma and then the rest, and I'm logged in, I was in here earlier. This looks a little different than you're used to because I was logged into our help, our customer knowledge center. There we go. Okay. So what is managing acquisitions alert? See how it brings us right into the doc. And you can enable and disable different alerts. I forget when this was new. It's new-ish. It's new-ish within the last year or so. And you see those roles. You have to be an ACK administrator to be able to edit these. Talking about where to go get them. Very helpful. Let's get back here. We're going to look at that acquisitions infrastructure. So these are those things that have to be set up in your environment. And remember, you all have a sandbox. So you can set this up in the sandbox, no problem. So you need to have a ledger associated with a fiscal period that's active. What a ledger does is it'll group sets of funds in their structures. It may be owned and available for some or all of the libraries in your institution. Again, it depends how your ACT department is set up, how they purchase, how the monies are split up. You may have more than one ledger in a fiscal year. I've been asked how to manage endowment funds. That might be a good reason to have more than one ledger in a fiscal year. We have two different types of funds. We have summary funds and allocated funds. So a summary fund is a grouping of subfunds. They may be nested. Create structure in your ledger. They're optional but recommended. Then allocated funds, that's where things really happen. That's where transactions take place. That's where money transfers. That's where monies are assigned. Monies are spent. Now, how you organize your ledger and funds, completely up to you. Do you break them down by department, by material type, by resource type? For you to create your own ledger and fund structure, it should be more detailed than the budget designations from the business office. So the fund structure, in conjunction with reporting codes, we talked about reporting codes, they illustrate, report on how your money is spent. That's where it really shows you what you're doing with your institution's money, where it's being spent, where it's being used. And remember my rules, let Alma do the work for you and don't make things more complicated than they need to be. If you're just starting to work on a fund structure, I recommend getting some sticky notes and a blank wall and move them around on there to figure out what you want it to look like before you create it in Alma. You want to work that out. Now here's an example to show you how funds can be nested using the summary funds. So here's my ledger, and I have a summary fund here, and it has two allocated funds. This summary fund has summary funds under it, so a little more nesting, and then down to the allocated funds. And also right off the ledger, there's an allocated fund. Maybe that's like shipping or something. Now, this is a sample fund structure that I got from a friend. I reached out to her and I asked her what her ledger looked like. So she had her ledger, and then her business office, this is how her business office breaks things down. She has 3 pots of money at her library, which is the university. She has print resources, electronic resources, and memberships. That's what they call them. That's what the business office calls them. Everything under here is for her tracking her knowledge. It's like her own personal budget. All the business office cares about are these 3 numbers. So she breaks print resources down into print subscriptions, and she breaks between standing order and journal. Print resources, she also has print one-time orders as a separate allocated fund. And then under print resources, she has an overhead summary fund with a processing and shipping. So she's tracking those separately from one another under this overhead. And then for her electronic resources, she has an allocated fund for electronic one-time orders, and then a summary fund for electronic subscriptions, broken down into ebooks, e-journals, and databases. So that's just a sample of what it can look like. Again, you know what you want to track. And I go into a lot of this, but structuring the top level of your ledger to match what the business office says, how they distribute your monies, how many pots of money. Like with my friends, print resources, electronic resources, memberships. Those were how the business office divided her money up. So that's the top of her ledger. So that if you're trying to balance what they think you have and you think you have, it's easier to compare when this top level matches what they say you have. Other things are going to be allocated that aren't paid for, but it should be easier with that top level matching how they give you your money. So easy to compare your balances to business office balances. It's like when we used to balance our checkbooks. Your summary funds help create a more detailed reporting structure. If you use whatever terminology the business office uses, helps you utilize all those allocated funds on time. Because when you get towards the end of the fiscal year, you might be in a use it or lose it situation. And then don't neglect those reporting codes for additional tracking and reporting. So in Alma, we have vendor records, and then we have vendor accounts. So in older systems, if you had multiple accounts with a vendor, I used to work with Voyager. And so if you had multiple accounts with EBSCO or Gale or whoever, you had multiple vendor records. In Alma, you have one vendor record and then multiple accounts. So maybe you have different discount amounts based on the account, or maybe you get certain amount of cataloging or processing done based with different accounts, or maybe it's based on format. So you would have that one EBSCO, ProQuest, Gale, whoever, one vendor record. And then your vendor has to have at least one account, because this is where your PO lines hook at that account level. So that's why the one vendor and then the account. So if it's different discounts, different processing, that's how they sort it out. That's what it'll look like in Alma. So the order line links to the account. It can link to the interface for electronic resources. Helpful, not required. And then also that license information, another helpful, not required. If I go in to my environment, acquisition, vendors. Edit. Here's my vendor record. The name, code, currencies. Now here, this one I only have one account. You can add additional accounts here. If I go look at my account, this is where, how are they paid? Is there a discount? Even if it's not exact, if it's a best guess estimate, that'll help with your encumbering monies. What is your expected receipt, claiming grace? So all of this information is set at this account level, not the vendor level. And this slide just talks about what are vendor roles, a material supplier or a subscription agent. That's set at the vendor account, used in order lines. What it means is that they receive orders and payments. If they're an access provider, means they're electronic resources. They have electronic resources, or can have them. And if they're a licensor, again, that's negotiates license for electronic resources. We'll see these in play as we go through here. Now, this is just a note about operator roles and scoping. Think carefully how your staff operators and the acquisitions roles that get assigned to them. You don't want them to be too limited, because people need to get their work done. But also, if they're too freely assigned, they can create another set of difficulties. And you're gonna, if you're just setting this up, you're gonna bump up against some oopses and, oh, we need to adjust that role. So give yourself some grace there and allow those oopses. When people are in implementation, I say, go push against the system. Make sure you need to do everything you should be able to do that you could do before. Some roles utilize scopes. If acquisitions is done centrally at your institution, easier to set up, but if certain scopes might be set at the library level, or if acquisitions is done at a library level, so that's also something else to be aware of. For instance, receiving operators are scoped to a service unit at a library. Purchasing operators can be scoped to either an institution or a library. Fund ledger viewers, again, library or institution. Now it all depends on you have, how much can that person see? How many act departments do you have? How private you want to keep that information. Licensed viewers are strictly at an institution. That's just information about how and when and, seats of electronic resources. That's not highly secure information. So we're down to the end here. So at the end of this series, and you're going to see these questions again, will you use Alma for acquisitions activities? I sincerely hope the answer is yes. Will you integrate Alma with vendors to automate ordering and invoicing workflows? I hope so. I really hope so. Or will you implement integration between Alma and your institution's business office? Maybe you're going to tackle that later. Plenty of our customers do it. So it's not something out of the ordinary. Maybe someone's going to retire and then you over in the business office and then you'll approach them. That's fine too. And also think about those additional features that you can implement after acquisitions is up and running. So making these decisions are going to help you automate the process, improve accuracy, save time and reduce effort spent on repetitive tasks, and ensure that the library's budget is spent in accordance with the institution's priorities. And you'll be able to prove it with hard numbers, data, etc. No questions about it. Now, in this PowerPoint, I've got a few resources. You'll hear me talk about the Knowledge Center. That's knowledge.exlibrisgroup.com. That's our documentation. Sometimes it's called the CKC for Customer Knowledge Center. Our product documentation is under Alma, product documentation, Alma Online Help, and acquisitions. And you're going to see me pop in and out of there throughout this series. We created a LibGuides for acquisitions. So acquisitions has a lot to it. We spent a lot of time on this. So you can avail yourself to that. And don't forget that all of our documentation is indexed in Google. So open it up. If you're looking for something, you don't have to navigate through. Just type in Alma, whatever you're looking for. You're going to see our documentation. You're going to see customer wikis. And a thing about customer wikis, some of our customers keep them very up to date and some do not. Some customers might be a consortium, some might be a standalone. So caveat emptor, look at that thing, because if someone didn't keep it up and they just really used it for implementation and they don't keep it up, but it's still out there, it might not have the most up-to-date information, but also they might have some really good workflow ideas for you too. So just look at everything very critically. This is the series. This is the series where you can get this PowerPoint and that document I showed you earlier about, I'm sharing it in the chat again, where you can get that Word doc about roles and terms. Now, if you ever, now the training that my team does, they're free, they're to everyone around the world. If you find yourself that you need a more targeted, individualized, customized approach, we do have a team. It's premium services. There is a cost for these services. If you feel you need them for any part of Alma, we can help you with individualized training, workflow optimization, configuration. We've contacted people that lost their system administrator and they knew they couldn't get one for a while. So they bought ours and we just, they said, okay, we need this done. We need that done. It was a smaller school and they just didn't have the bandwidth to do it. So we can do a number of things for you if you need it. Next week, we're going to be ordering. We're going to get into Alma. We're going to be talking about the ordering workflow. I'm going to be showing you it instead of just seeing it on a slide. We're going to talk about where you get bibliographic records. We're going to do orders for one-time orders, continuous and standing orders. We're going to take a deep dive into purchase order lines, PO line templates, and PO line statuses. So thank you for your time. Ooh, 1 hour. That was my goal. So next time I could say this is an hour. Now, whenever you close any of our sessions, there's a survey that comes up. And my manager and we read every comment, everything that you have to say, because we're always trying to improve every one of our sessions, all of our series. I didn't see any questions come in today. Wendy, thanks for your help. I really appreciate it. We'll see you in a week. And I hope you have a great rest of your day or evening. Bye-bye.